Hi, I'm John Messer. I am the Regional Executive for Great Lakes Region, and I'm the Leadership Development Catalyst for Luminex. This is part 2 of a systems series, and today I want to talk to you about how it is that systems actually addresses problems in a new way. And I'm going to do that through the use of a tool that has been used by many people, but if you want to see the one I'm talking about, it's in Peter Senge's The Fifth Discipline. And that tool is called the Systems Iceberg. And just like every other iceberg illustration, there are those parts that we can see that are above the surface of the water, but the parts that are below the water we don't see, and that's where the real damage is done, or that's where things really happen. And so in a systems iceberg, there are 4 levels, and the part that's above the surface of the water, those parts that we can see, are the events. We see an event where a ministry success is an event, a worship service is an event, an accident in the parking lot is an event. We can always see them. And when we see an event, what we can do about an event is react to it. The reason we get into the linear thinking problem of quick fixes is that we tend to exist on the level of events. We see something happen and we react to it. And the only thing that we can do when we're reacting to an event is just treat a symptom. We have to get deeper to be able to do something to change the events so that we're not in reactionary mode. So the next level below the surface is the level of patterns. When you string several events together, you have a pattern. And most patterns aren't visible unless you're looking for them. And at the level of patterns, what you can do is you can anticipate. If you can see that in our parking lot, when it snows, we tend to have people slip and fall, we know that that pattern means we have to anticipate that the next time it snows, we have to make sure that we get sand and salt spread earlier so we don't have slips and falls. That's anticipating, and that's what you can do at the level of patterns. Below patterns is the level of underlying structures. That's where we start to see that sometimes it's our structure that is driving these patterns and these events. And when we are looking at the level of underlying structures, we know that we can design structures that will anticipate the patterns so it will keep us out of reactionary mode with events. So for example, with our parking lot slip and fall example, it may be that we don't have a full-time custodian at the church. And so it relies on volunteer participation to get that salt and sand spread. Well, what if we had a part-time paid person for the winter months that was responsible to make sure that every time it snows, they have the church parking lot salted and sanded by 7 a.m.? What if we did that? That's a structural change. And so as we change the underlying structure, we deal with the pattern that we've anticipated, and we're changing the events because we're not in reactionary mode anymore. We're being proactive, and by changing the underlying structure, we have addressed the pattern and we've changed the level of events. But there's one more level that's even deeper, that even has a broader and deeper change in the church, and that's the level of mental models. Everything that happens in the church and everything that happens in any system, any social system, is built on our mental models. We're going to talk a little bit more about mental models in a moment, but just for now, at the base, at the very bedrock base of a social system, a church, mental models are the place where we can transform that system. Transformation happens when we recognize our mental models, when we surface them, and then we are willing to modify them, to update them, to change them. So mental models are the bedrock. Structures are the place where we can design different systems. Patterns are the thing that we can anticipate, but events we can only react to. And so why does linear thinking fail? Because linear thinking is focused primarily at the level of events, and all you can do is react, or in other words, treat the symptoms. If you want to get to the real core issues, if you want to get to the real problem, you have to go below the surface to the level of patterns, structures, and mental models. Okay? So now let's talk a little bit more about mental models. Let me explain more what mental models are and why they make such a difference. Mental models, very simply, are subconscious mental maps of how things work. And that can be as simple as how a vending machine dispenses a can of soda, or as complex as how the world economy works. Mental models are, like I said, subconscious. These are not things that you intentionally think about every day. As a matter of fact, that's the focus and the purpose of a mental model, is to prevent you from having to think about every detail every time you come to them. Mental models enable us to respond and react quickly without having to think through every possible issue and every detail. So those subconscious maps then are built on our beliefs, our assumptions, our values, and our experiences. We start building mental maps as soon as we become conscious, and our entire lifetimes are building mental maps. We are constantly working to confirm our mental models. Notice I'm emphasizing to confirm our mental models. One of the things about our mental models is that we tend to look for confirming evidence and we tend to discount disconfirming evidence. So we're looking for things that prove that our mental models are right, and we tend to stay away from things that would prove that our mental model is wrong, unless we have a process that enables us to do that in a healthy and constructive way. So they're subconscious maps built on our beliefs, assumptions, values, and experiences. We're constantly confirming them subconsciously. It's not something we're doing intentionally or consciously. So the key to addressing the level of mental models, in other words, that base transformational level of a social system, is to surface our mental models. That's the key to transformation. Think about this. Every person that comes to your church has a mental model of what it means to be a church. Every person who comes to your church has a mental model of what a worship service is and what should happen and what shouldn't happen. Every person in your church has a mental model of what a church leader or a pastor or an elder or a deacon should be, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. How many times do you think those mental models are exactly the same? I would suggest they're never exactly the same. You have as many mental models of those things as you have people. So how do you deal with that? Well, first of all, you can realize that most church leadership problems are the result of differing mental models, right? If you struggle with people who wonder why you're not spending more time doing visitation, it's probably because of their mental model of what a pastor is and does. If you struggle with people who are wondering why you don't do more leadership training, it's probably because of their mental model of what a pastor does and what they don't do. Mental models are essential to coming to a common unified vision. But you cannot come to a common unified vision with wildly disparate mental models. To come to a common vision, it's very important for church leaders to understand that we will have to work on aligning mental models. Notice, I'm not saying you have to have identical mental models, but we have to bring mental models to the surface and then try to align them more closely than they are. That is the key to finding common vision. And once you've found a common vision, the mission and the effectiveness of the church and the health of the church will increase significantly. So, think about the systems iceberg, think about mental models, and realize that you don't have to find who's to blame, you don't have to find the culprits. Very often, the cause of problems is simply that we have different mental models about how things are supposed to work. And when you think about it from that way, you can be much more proactive, much more positive, and much more confirming of people who have different mental models than you do. That's one of the big benefits of systems thinking. You don't have to find who's to blame. The system is to blame. So let's blame the system and change that. All right? I'll see you next time for part 3 of systems thinking. And by the way, there will be a handout available on the website for you that'll give you more details on the systems iceberg and mental models. Thanks.